Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of the Art and Business of Writing podcast. I'm your host, Chris Jones. Really excited to bring you this guest I've got this week, Jonathan David Lewis. If you don't know Jonathan David Lewis, after this episode, you are really going to be excited to learn more about him. He is the author of Brand vs. Wild, Building Resilient Brands for Harsh Business Environments. Jonathan is an engaging and authoritative speaker on shaping brands that survive and thrive in today's tough and uncertain world. Part of what he does is works with branding and business strategies. So what Jonathan's going to talk about today on this episode is really how authors can develop resilient and strong brands, how they can figure out their focus. Sometimes we get caught up in trying to do many things to get a result, to yield a result. But what Jonathan talks about really is niching in, tightening up, not going overboard on social media and some of the other marketing platforms that we have access to, but really taking a deep dive, 1 inch wide, 1 mile deep to focus on what we need to do. So Jonathan definitely knows his stuff, and I'm excited to bring him to you. So without further ado, here is Jonathan David Lewis.
All right, welcome to the Art and Business of Writing, Jonathan. Glad to have you on. Can you expand a little bit about your bio?
Definitely. Well, I've got 3 beautiful children, a wonderful wife. I'm pretty into Spartan races over the last couple of years. That's kind of my outlet to test myself. So I kind of put myself through torture every few months as I go try to run a race and jump over, piles of fiery wood and climb over water obstacles, and so that's pretty fun. Besides that, I'm located here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and run a marketing firm. And it's been a lot of fun the last couple of years, especially the last few months as my book has come out and really hit the tour hard and trying to market it. So it's been a fun few months.
No, that's awesome, man. Spartan Racing. I've never done one of those. I've got friends who do like the Tough Mudders and some of these other races. Is a Spartan run similar to the Tough Mudder, or is it something like more extreme, more Rambo-like?
I think it's more Rambo-like. No, it's a lot like Tough Mudder, probably a little more emphasis on the obstacles. So it feels like I'm, going through a boot camp or something. But it's a lot of fun. It's one of those, just more testing your limits type of thing. And it's a lot of fun to do with people. So I have kind of a crew that I go with. And so there's a kind of a bonding going on, and it's very team-oriented too. So it's not just you versus the world. If there's something you can't quite do, they do encourage each other, your team to help each other out. So it's kind of one of those fun things. It's not for everybody. It's definitely a torture fest, but it has been fun for me. So.
Oh, that's awesome, man. I love running. I run most of the week. I run at least 5 days a week, but I've never brought myself to do that. I've never brought myself to do the Mudder or the Spartan race yet. Despite, my sister's done it a couple times. She's like, "Hey, join my team." I'm like, "I'd like to do it," but it seems like every single weekend that she wants to do it is like a wrong weekend because I've got children too, and they got activities. I'm like, I wish I could this weekend, but I'll have to do one now. You definitely got my interest all the way peaked. So, hey, tell me about Brand vs. Wild. You just released Brand vs. Wild back in May. Tell us about the book.
Yeah, Brand vs. Wild. It's really an attempt at trying to get our arms around this crazy pace of change in technology, in business, in really every domain. If you look at politics and in every industry, how do you build a brand in the midst of what is really a pretty scary, isolating, overwhelming time to do so? And so I'm pulling from survival psychology, real stories of survival, real psychology. And then what we discovered is it's really highly correlated with modern business and with our own proprietary research. So much so that I can say crazy things like there really psychologically is very little difference between a group of people that crash land on a mountain or lost in the desert and a group of business professionals just trying to tackle an unexpected challenge. Both groups have a very predictable response to disruption, and you can learn from that survival psychology just as much as from business research itself.
Now, why did you decide to write the book?
It's really a part of my company's practice. So we turn around stalled, stuck, and stale brands, and really we're constantly doing new research. And as we do new research, we publish our results. And in this case, we discovered how highly correlated our research was with survival psychology. And I actually started. I noticed this correlation, and so I thought it was just going to be another Forbes article. Okay, this is interesting enough for an article. But as I got into it, wow, the onion layer just kept on peeling back, and so I knew there was a lot more to this, and it got book length the more I dug into it.
Now, explain the title to us. Brand versus Wild. What's the title mean?
So the wild is sort of a play on man versus wild, where really, it just feels like so much is against us today, and it feels like if you're a business professional, it just feels like you can't keep up the rise of risk really in every decision, where we can no longer reduce risk to a comfortable level now in every decision we make. So how do we live with risk? How do we actually look forward to risk as it might represent opportunity? So brand versus wild is, brand on the side of that's what I know. I'm a brander, I'm a marketing professional, but wild is just the world around us. And we have a technical definition of that, where the wild technically are 3 of the 7 factors we learned affect growth in business. So the wild is the economy, aggressive competition, and industry disruption itself, where the 4 internal factors are really the wild within. And those are inconsistency, loss of focus, loss of nerve, and ultimately a lack of alignment. Those are all the things that affect growth in a business, and we see them in survival scenarios as well.
Yeah, when I think about kind of the changing landscape around what we do as authors and writers, it's funny, like the tools that we have available to us now that were once just exclusively to traditional publishers have made it possible for self-published authors to really take the game right to the front door of the traditionally published authors. Now you can have the same sort of branding things that they have. You can have the same sort of marketing style. You can have access to audio, video. I mean, it's amazing at how broad the landscape has become and how the playing field is getting a little more level.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to talk about disrupted industry, look at books, look at publishing, right? It is just like everything, just like marketing, just like music, just like retail. It's being disrupted. It is disrupted, and it's really being flattened. Where it used to be controlled by giant publishing companies, and just like music had their industries of music, or titans of music, rather, it's been flattened where everybody really has access to the same tools now. So you have to look for value in different ways, and as a writer, that if you don't want to promote yourself, well, first of all, you probably won't be successful. But second, you can look for someone else to help you with that. There's questions around the value of it. But yeah, everything is at our fingertips from a promotion standpoint. But something I've learned is that the tools, just because you have them, doesn't mean that they're going to be effective or you'll use them correctly. And it's certainly been a journey myself. And as my firm, we've written 3 books over the last few years, learning what works, what doesn't, and to go beyond just having tools, but learning how to have a platform and what even that means, and grow an audience and sell books over time. And it's a journey. It's certainly not a destination once you get published.
No, you're absolutely right. Using the tools is most of the battle. Having them is half the battle. But so you just used a word that I really want to jump into right now. You talked about having a platform. For an author, what does that mean? What does it mean to have and create a platform for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the way publishers will use it, it's really, do you have a following? Do you have a fan base? Do you have a built-in book purchaser? Are you famous already in any way? And if not, if the answer is no to all of those things, then you're less likely to have a publisher or an agent want to pick you up. And so my platform is my company, all of my clients, all the clients I've served in the past, and my mailing list that I've built up over that. We've been in business 20 years, so I built it up over that time. So I that's my platform, in addition to the other 2 books and all the research that feeds into it. But we have a quote-unquote fan base. We have people that will buy our book, people that will show up to a book release party, that sort of thing. and it's one of those things that you can't just sort of wave a magic wand and make it out of nowhere. You have to grow it over time. You have to be interesting enough to have a fan base, which means you have to be doing something, have a unique angle. And the other important piece of this is it's not enough to have a book or a great book idea. You really have to have a fan base, otherwise you're not going to sell anything. And so one thing I've really learned is it's not about having, rephrase that. It's not just about having an awesome product. I can't tell you how many amazing books are out there that nobody has read, and that amazing book ideas that a publisher hasn't picked up simply because they know it's not going to sell because nobody follows you. You don't have any fans. So having a platform is a pretty important aspect to it, especially if you think about disruption. It's really, really risky for a publisher to pick somebody up, because they're not always fronting money anymore, but sometimes they are putting up some money. But they're investing time, editing time. They're going to distribute it. They're going to invest something up front. And so because of that risk, they want to mitigate it by ensuring you already have, quote unquote, a platform, that you already have a fan base of some kind.
Okay, so how does an author build a platform? How do they build that fan base that you're talking about here?
Yeah, well, first and possibly most importantly, you need to have a unique perspective. You can't, if you just having a Facebook page and being a writer doesn't mean you have a platform. You need to have some unique angle on the world. So my unique angle on the world, I turn around stalled, stuck, and stale brands, and I'm able to do that because I know I'm the only person in the world that has correlated survival psychology with modern marketing. Okay? So that's my thing. No one else has it. Nobody else can speak with my voice. Nobody else can talk about the same things I do. So it's unique at some level, and people will follow that. So first and foremost, you need a perspective. You need an angle, something that's your own. And mine is really driven by my business. If you're not a business person, that doesn't mean you can't have a unique angle. It's have an opinion about your subject matter, and then share that opinion. So first and foremost, have something unique. But then you need to, I have a saying, when I build my marketing plan, for instance, my strategy, my approach is to give my way to success. Everybody in the world is trying to get something. And when you get into the publishing world, if you're trying to get an influencer to cover you on their blog, or you're trying to get a podcaster to do an interview with you or something, everybody's asking for stuff. Very few people are giving. So I have a column on Forbes, and so I really try to quote people, ask people I know for a quote, and just feature them in my article. It's just a little way of giving back and giving them a little bit of exposure. It's one little way I can give, and it doesn't even have to be on Forbes. I mean, if you have a blog, ask for other people's perspectives, give them a voice, try to help them and retweet them, help make them famous, help make them build their platform, and in return they'll help you really build your platform. So have something unique to say, then give. I think giving first before taking is really important. Then you get to all the tactical stuff, like should I have a social presence? Should I have a blog? What name do I use? What's the title of my book? And when you get to that part, it's a little tougher because it really depends on your audience. If you just go straight to tactics and start executing, you're skipping all the important stuff. So first and foremost, before you decide, hey, I want to be on Twitter, you need to find out, is my audience on Twitter? Where are they? What do they care about? How do they want to communicate with each other and with me? And it's going to be very different. So for me, I'm very focused on LinkedIn and Twitter because that's where business people are. That's where journalists are. That's where that type of person hangs out, has intellectual conversations or not, and goes back and forth. Where I've tried Facebook and Instagram, those are very different. Instagram's very artsy, and so if your book is more on the arts, Instagram might make a ton of sense. Or say that your book is focused on millennials or younger folks, then Instagram might make a ton of sense. But if not, don't waste your time. Don't go straight to tactics. Start with your audience and understand where they are. You're also going to want to know what are you trying to do in the first place. what's your objective here? Not just to make noise. Everybody's making noise. You need to have a specific objective. So that might be, I need 5,000 followers. And I'm going to do that in a year and a half. That's what I want to do. Real followers, not a bunch of, robots. I want 5,000 real followers. So you define your audience, you figure out where they're hanging out, and then you do what it is required to grow that audience over time and try to get to a certain level. Then when you go to a publisher or an agent and say, look at my platform, I've been featured here and here and here. I'm published by this publication, and this is the audience size. I have 2,000 regular folks listening to what I have to say. It's a little different than if you just go to them and say, check out this cool idea, look at this book idea or something. It's just a very different conversation.
No, that's all great advice, man. I love all this stuff. Something you said that was really cool was just giving your way to success. I think that's very, very crucial. And you talked about using your columns to feature other people. As I mentioned to you before, some of our audience, they're nonfiction authors. They're in the coaching space. So they're writing books that are really manuals for their coaching programs, and they're really using that as ways to generate speaking engagements, such and so forth. So the whole idea of columns, how much weight do you put on people who are in that arena to start to write independently in columns such as yours in Forbes or other places where they can share their expertise and give back?
Yeah, I would say everybody has something to give. You may not realize it, you may not know totally where it is, or you may need to work a little bit to fill it out, but everybody has something to give. So if you're a coach, for instance, automatically you have X amount of players and their parents who are an audience and care what you have to say. So, is there a way to give for somebody who might want to speak to that audience? I don't know, Or even beyond that, if you're a coach, you might also be a teacher. Then there's another platform, So everybody has a place to give. You might go to church. There's an audience there. You might go to this, go to that. Everyone has some level of influence and some platform, some way to give. And you just need to ask yourself, how can I give? And what's interesting about it is just kind of human nature, we're so focused on what we need to get that we don't even think about ways we can give sometimes. And I'm not pretending to be great at this. I'm just as guilty as anybody else. But if you do slow down and just ask that question and spend 5 minutes writing down some ideas, you'll think of things you hadn't thought of before. It's a matter of genuinely wanting other people to succeed. And then over time, all of a sudden you realize, oh, I'm succeeding as well, because they're now far more likely to want me to succeed, to help me succeed, because I've given them something. And probably the smallest piece of that ever, in the smallest increment of that is a like or a retweet online. Don't just be yelling at the world. Go out there and be narrow, be focused. But if there's 5 influencers that you wish would show you a little bit of love, identify the 5 who also speak to your audience, who will help you grow your platform, and then start showing them some love. Give. So go retweet, go comment, go like, and over time, that's probably the smallest way you can do that. There's a lot of bigger ways you can do that. You can invite somebody to come speak to somewhere you have. If you have a podcast, invite them on the podcast. Quote somebody in your blog. Just look for a way to make somebody else successful. Make somebody else, get a piece of what you hope to get sometime. And as an approach, I think it has a lot of power, because people want to help people they think, are genuinely interested in their own success. So, and then once you have a platform, that apply it to your folks, the people, your own fans. Apply it to your fans. How can you give to your fans? How can you magnify their voice and help them be part of your success? And you'll be amazed that people really buy in. They'll actually act like a fan and not just a follower. Somebody who's invested in you.
Ooh, I like that. Acting like a fan instead of a follower. That's great. Now, you talked about unique perspective. Just having an opinion on a subject matter. Is there any sort of exercise or some way that you break that down so that someone who's listening can say, well, how do I develop that? How do I come up with a unique perspective that I
definitely,
my audience?
Absolutely. I think the first thing is take the pressure off. Okay, we're now outside of the world of mass. Okay, there's no such thing as mass anymore. There's no mass media. There's no mass entertainment. Mass is gone. It's dead, and it's being replaced by niche. So your goal, whoever you are, whatever you're writing, whatever you're creating, your goal is not to be famous. Your goal is not to, reach the masses. That's almost impossible now. Your goal is to find the smallest amount of people that will absolutely love you and make you successful. So you don't need that many in the grand scheme of things. You need just a small fan base. Seth Godin calls it your tribe, right? So first and foremost, just define them in a very limited way. But then you need a focus, right? You need your unique perspective because you need to be able to give something to your tribe, to your fan base. So there's 3 questions that I think can really, really help with this. First and foremost, what are you really, really good at? So ask yourself, what am I just really, really good at? What am I exceptionally talented at? What am I exceptionally aware of? And kind of understand thyself. And that can include your subject matter, but it can also include maybe more of a trait of who you are. So for instance, for me, I'm really, really good at connecting dots. I can see chaos and then make it into order. I'm really, really good at simplifying things. I can see complexity and find the simplicity. And then I'm really, really good at communicating that in certain avenues, for like speaking, for instance. Those 3 things I know I'm really good at. But then here's the next question. This one's really important. What does your audience, what does your tribe really, really want and need? Because there's a whole bunch of stuff about you that nobody cares about, right? There's a whole bunch of stuff about your audience that you don't care about. But there is an overlapping area where you find relevancy, which brings you to the 3rd question. You ask yourself, what am I good at? You ask yourself what your audience needs and wants. Then you ask yourself the 3rd question, where do those things overlap? That's where you find relevancy and power and your unique perspective. Because, there's a bunch of stuff that you would like to talk about that nobody cares about. But there's something you can authentically, powerfully talk about that everybody in your tribe cares about. So find that overlap, and that's really the key to focus, the key to having the power to say no to things. That's really, really important as you try to find a unique perspective and develop a platform. There's too many options now for you and I, the small folks who don't have every resource at our disposal. We don't have time or energy to do everything. So we need to be empowered to say no. And to say no, you need to have some sort of standard. Well, your focus is your standard. Your unique perspective is your standard. So that gives you the power to say, well, I could go provide a guest blog post on X, Y, and Z blog, but that's so far out of the realm of what I'm about. That's a waste of time. They might be totally great and valid, but that's not really my thing. I'm really focused here because that's where my tribe cares about me.
Wow, that's all great stuff. No, I love how you broke that last part down. Just, what am I good at? What does my tribe want and need? And then where does that all overlap? That's excellent. Now, how do you overcome that fear of missing out? I think a lot of people deal with that. Like, well, if I don't go on Instagram, I'm going to miss out on something here. If I don't go on Twitter, I might miss out on something here. How do you just break that mindset and say, no, I'm just going to be here and here. That's going to be good enough while I build up my platform?
It's a really good question. I'm in the middle of it right now. So I was previously on 4 different social platforms through my book launch, etc., and have recently cut 2 of them out. And it wasn't easy. I had a measure of success on each, but it was really a matter of time and energy. And I'll tell you this, there's a number of planks in your platform. So you have your speaking engagements, you have your social media presence, you have your publishing presence. So that might be an article or a column, a blog. You have a variety of things that make up your platform, and they're not all equal. So one thing I've found is my social media presence, while important and while it does encourage retention and encourage people to kind of stick around and stay interested, it's not the way I'm getting most of my interest or most of my engagement. I'm getting far more eyes and ears by going out and speaking and doing interviews with the media and doing interviews on podcasts. I'm getting a lot more that way, for instance. So make sure while you understand what tactics are in your platform, don't treat them all like they're equal. Understand, the whole equation of how much you put into it versus what you get out of it. So I have personally found that social media, while important, while I'm engaged in it every day, I have limited it and I've focused it because it's near the bottom of the priority list for what I'm trying to do. And then as you look at all of the tools in front of you, there's far too many tools than you have time or effort to really focus on. So the key there is, as I mentioned before, the key there is to have an approach to pre-select those choices for you, so that you're not just trying and failing on everything, or just trial and error, which wastes a lot of time. So if you have an objective, and if you know who your audience is, and you know what your unique perspective is, then those decisions should kind of shake out pretty straightforward after that. Those three things I just outlined there will tell you what social platform you should be on, will tell you what type of trade organizations or what type of audiences might be interested in hearing you speak. That'll tell you what kind of podcasts would be interested in featuring you. All of those things that determine what tactics you're involved in are predetermined by your objective, target, and unique perspective itself. So, whatever you're doing today, if you don't have an objective, target, and unique perspective, you need to stop and you need to start working on those things. Otherwise, you're just kind of probably putting a lot of effort and it's all random.
Ooh, man. Yeah, that's good. How does someone just not get caught in the noise? Because there's so much noise, when you're doing all these different things.
Yeah. It's interesting. This kind of touches on some elements of my book because that's what my clients are feeling. I mean, they are caught up in the noise. We're all sort of caught up in the noise, and I professionally market, and so I'm kind of caught up in that noise every day where I'm looking for what works, what doesn't, etc. And the first thing, if you feel like you're caught up in the noise, if you feel like you're a little bit overwhelmed, you kind of don't know what you're doing, and it's just all too much, the first thing that any survivalist would tell you, if you're lost in the wilderness, is you need to stop. It's actually an acronym: Stop, Think, Observe, Plan. So you need to stop. You need to really, if you're in the wilderness, sit down. Just sit for a second and observe your surroundings. And what's interesting about this physiologically is when you're lost, you're actually often there's all these hormones flowing through your blood, and you've got your adrenaline going and your mind's racing, and you're not very productive in that state. You're either running around or you're sort of paralyzed. And when you stop, when you sit in that scenario, it's really your first act of courage. You're taking over control from being erratic, being wild, to a rational approach. So stop. Then you need to orient yourself to your surroundings. In the wilderness, it's as simple as, did I tell anybody where I was? Or that I was going to be out here? Did I bring any supplies? Is it getting dark? Do I need shelter? Do I have some food? All those sort of questions. In a sense, for an author or somebody who's trying to be an author, orient yourself to what's going on in the marketplace. So just because Harry Potter was huge, an enormous success, doesn't mean that means that category is probably going to be saturated, right? You need to do something that doesn't exist yet. It needs to be unique. So orient yourself to the marketplace. Second, the other thing when you orient yourself to the publishing marketplace is, well, it's not all about getting an agent and getting a publisher anymore. It depends on your unique objectives and your needs. There's totally valid paths that are with publishers and agents. There's totally valid paths that are outside of that. So the world has really changed in publishing today, where it's not a straight and narrow anymore. It's there's different value equations. I'll say that my publisher, who's great, has been very valuable on the editing side and on the distribution side, and on the marketing side has been fine. No complaints, but it hasn't been crazy, right? So those are pros and cons that you need to weigh as you approach the marketing world itself. So if you feel like you're all over the place, you need to stop. If you're feeling overwhelmed, you need to stop and look around, and don't just guess. That's what everyone else is doing. A lot of people feel like if they just put in enough effort, then they can figure it out. When you don't, often that'll just wear you out, burn you out. That's not even the way to do it. You need to stop and think for a second. You need to observe what's going on around you, and then you can approach it very, wisely as you have built your platform and you have your objective target and unique perspective, which carries everything. I mean, it really is a solution. And the other thing is, you really need to be patient. Very few people are overnight successes. And I attended a conference and heard Seth Godin speak. Seth Godin's a big wig in marketing, and he was talking about his own success, and he called it a 25-year overnight success. And the idea was, it took him a long time. It seems like he's always been successful, but he hasn't. It's taken him a long time to build up a platform, to get the gigs, to work up the ladder, and that's really more realistic. Very few people are discovered and made famous. It's really, are you in this? Are you committed? Is this what you want with your life? Is it a side thing? All of those are valid. Just make sure you know what it is, and then be patient. Work on it. Be steady. Be focused. And if you are steady, if you are focused, if you are patient, you will see a return over time. It's just not going to be, a lot of us are sold a dream, or we buy a dream that doesn't really exist out there. It's not, very few people just fall into success like that. It's a lot of hard work.
Oh, yes, it is. It is. But I love that Seth Godin quote. Yeah, I've heard that one too. Just the 25 or 24 year success.
Right.
Overnight success. Now, so for the author who's been working, grinding at building this platform, and they just kind of feeling like they're plateauing, how do they get unstuck when they get to that point where just things feel like they're just leveling out?
Yeah, if you're leveling out, it's possible that you're not fresh anymore. Right? So what was once a unique perspective is sort of shifting away again. And that's where you need to reevaluate your audience often. How have their tastes and behaviors, and where's the industry going? And that's the whole, skate towards where the puck's going, not where the puck is at. So if you're feeling stuck today and you're getting a little stale in your platform, you just haven't grown much, you might have saturated the market that you exist in. You might have your market itself, whatever fan base you have, might be tapped out, and it's time to redefine it. And this is what I'll say: the solution is not to become less focused and sort of just broaden your definition of your audience and what you're focused on. The solution is to find another focus. Because if you just sort of get more vanilla, that's going to make you less interesting, and you won't have fans. You might have followers, or even less. So it still remains being about focus. It's just redefining that to the marketplace, and always going back to those three questions of what am I good at, what does my customer need or my fan need, and really in the middle where those things overlap. Because over time, you change a little bit, your fan base can change a little bit, and where you overlap will shift over time. That you see that in everywhere in the world. You see it in business, you see it in politics. Things shift over time. That's why you're constantly reevaluating.
What is the role of fear in holding back someone's platform or their brand? And how do you overcome that?
Man, fear is just... So one thing that we really discovered in our own research is fear, among the other internal dynamics, is really the first thing to strike. So what happens whenever a group of people crash land on a mountain, or whether politics is being disrupted right now by our president? Whenever there's a disruption of any kind, four things hit in cascading order. First, you're afraid, there's very specific things that happen. Then you lose your focus, you start to drift. Then you become inconsistent, you act wild. Then you lose your alignment, and if you have a team, you'll lose your alignment with your team, or if it's just you and your audience, you can lose your alignment with your audience. So the first thing that happens, and really what can often hold back people like us who write, who are creative, is fear. And when you're afraid, Often you really resist narrowly defining your fan base. You want to please everybody. You'll take anybody. Like, please, somebody just love me, just read my stuff. When really that's the opposite of what you need to do. And in marketing, there's a really famous case study with Mountain Dew. And for anybody listening, a few might remember the old marketing campaign for Mountain Dew, which was Yahoo Mountain Dew, which had these hillbillies swinging in the bayou. And it was very, very different than what they are today. And at that time, they were like 24th, 23rd in market share. And what they decided was, as opposed to being kind of unfocused, they decided to laser focus on what they define as dudes, which are young, X-Games, energetic guys. And we're all aware of the modern stuff where they're laser focused, and they moved from 23rd, 24th in market share to 4th in market share. They grew by narrowing their audience. And so for you and I, for our platforms, we're really tempted, especially if we're just starting out or if we're losing our platform, we're really tempted to broaden our definition or take anything that'll come, when really the opposite is what we need to do. What is the smallest amount of people that we can define that's required to make us successful? And that's our tribe. That, for some people, that could be 10 people. For others, maybe it's 2,000 people. But whatever the thing is, you need to narrowly define your audience. The other thing that happens, though, is when you're afraid, you're really reticent to invest in yourself, reticent to push your creativity or push your subject matter forward. You sort of cling to what you know. And those are very, very bad things, obviously. You need to continually evolve. And if you're building a platform, you need to continually push your subject matter forward. You need to be inquisitive and curious and look around and try things and ask questions. And if you're afraid, you're usually not doing that. You're afraid to even share your stuff with people, when that's the opposite. You need feedback. You need to know what's not good and what's good. But it can be a very sensitive thing for folks like us. And so fear is a big issue. And really the solution to fear is your focus. And so that's the next thing you tend to lose is, if you don't have focus, you don't have elbows in the publishing marketplace. You don't have sharp elbows. You're sort of just blending in. You need a focus, and you're trying to be all things to all people. And again, if you're just chasing a trend, you notice someone else has been wildly successful, so you're trying to chase that, you're probably not very focused. You're not unique. You're not different. The future is not mass. It's not mass media. It's not mass entertainment. The future is very niche. So there's power in niche. So, take the shackles off. You are free to focus. You're free to niche, because that's where you will be successful. After focus, you're turning. Often people get wild. They're just trying anything. They're looking for silver bullet solutions. They're looking for easy answers. And I'll tell you right now, there are no silver bullet solutions. There is nothing that'll give you a platform overnight. There's nothing that's going to make you famous. There's nothing that's going to sell 1 million books overnight. There are no silver bullet solutions. So that's where you get into consistency. Being consistent with focus over time is what actually can give you confidence, give you courage, get rid of your fear by being focused. And ultimately, the last problem we deal with, which is really alignment issues, takes care of itself if you have conviction about what you know, what your contribution is to the world, and who your audience is, who your tribe is, and you've narrowly defined who they are. So those are the things I would really focus on. Before you just worry about what you're going to do, worry about who you are and how you're approaching everything.
Wow, dude, that's good stuff. I like I listen to Grant Cardone a lot, and he always talks about just everything's about showing up. And everything you do, just keep showing up. Mm-hmm. And a lot of what you said is that, and I love that part you talked about. Just consistency is consistency with focus over time. That's kind of the key to success. But you have to keep showing up and being there. Being that 25-year overnight success. Because I think we get into this whole thing where we look at people online and we watch the videos, and we got everyone talking about, I've got this great laptop lifestyle business, and I'm on the beach and I'm making 6 figures and I've got Lamborghinis, and it's like, who's doing that?
Yeah, that stuff is ridiculous. That? Yeah, nobody's doing that. It's so ridiculous. It's such a facade. And I'll tell you, I think insecurity is a big part of what we all deal with, especially the more creative we are. And one thing that you can stop doing right now that'll help you is stop comparing yourself to everybody else. That's not going to get you anywhere. And even if you compare yourself to somebody that you know is tried and true, like Seth Godin, even that can be out of whack because you make assumptions about, oh, well, he was an overnight success, those sort of things, where just stop comparing yourself. I've heard speakers, including Seth Godin, talk about how they don't read their Amazon reviews. They don't engage in comments because there's so many trolls online and there's so much weird stuff that it's up to each author, it's up to each person how they approach this. Some people really engage because that's part of who their tribe is, but you have to be careful. If the more you compare yourself, there are so many lies, so many facades, so many false successes out there that it can whack you out. I mean, it can make you think things and act ways that just are fundamentally untrue. The real world, you learned everything you need to know from the real world, probably in kindergarten, probably from your mom or your grandmother. It's like, it's hard work, it's grit, it's consistency, it's showing up, it's having a unique perspective, it's working hard. It's all of those things that, and it's sort of a fire test. I'll tell you, if this is just a hobby for you that you're pretending is professional, or you're pretending is going to turn into something, you're not going to stick with it. Because it's just, you're going to burn out, you're going to lose interest. So if you are disciplined and it's more than a hobby, you will devote yourself to it, and you'll get it to you'll build that platform so you're attractive to an agent, so you can get a publisher and do all the things that are required to be successful. And it's something that is just really, really hard for a lot of people. And one of the mistakes I have seen, and I've heard from other authors and publishers that have told me this, is a lot of authors are hyper focused on their content, which they need to be, right? It needs to be good content. But one author that I talked to, who's both self-published and has been published by a publisher, said, writing content is really 40%, 50% of the battle. It really is marketing the content, and in a way that's effective. And because it doesn't matter if nobody reads it, then why are you spending, killing yourself writing this stuff? So seeing things in perspective, looking at the long term, deciding whether it's a hobby or if this really is something you want to put so much energy into, those are all really important aspects to being a successful author.
Very much so. Thank you so much for all that you've shared today. It's been great having you. Tell our audience how they can get a hold of you, Jonathan, and follow you or like any of your social platforms.
Definitely. Well, you can go to jonathandavidlewis.com. That's my company website, and you can learn all about Brand vs. Wild. You can find links to my social platforms, and also you can actually have a self-diagnosis survey on there that kind of, you can self-diagnose how stalled, stuck, or stale you are. So it's kind of fun to take that too. And certainly you can find Brand vs. Wild on Amazon or anywhere books are sold.
Hey, thanks for spending part of your afternoon with us, Jonathan.
It's been a blast. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I'll be in touch.